Skol! Skol, Skol! Welcome into the Skol Purple Podcast, episode number 26. It's Cut Down Day, and I'm Carson Schubert alongside former Viking update writer Kevin Brown as we talk about the cuts that the Vikings made, the trades that the Vikings made, and some other things to talk about in regards to the roster and potentially some other things that the Vikings could be up to before the roster is officially set for week one. Kevin, how are you doing there tonight?
Great, fun day. Watching the cuts come through a little trickle at a time.
Is it more fun than anything that happened in the preseason?
I don't know. It's a busy
Toss
day.
up.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Well, let's go ahead and get right into it here this evening. Glad that you're joining us here. Feel free to go ahead and comment if you have any surprises that you think that were, or maybe somebody that they should have cut that they didn't. We'll get into our thoughts here as well, but no surprise, Sean Mannion and Kellen Mond both off the team on waivers and cut. And it sounds like Sean Mannion might be a practice squad guy, but it's also possible that he's not. Maybe he just is a coach, but not really too surprising based on how they performed in training camp and then in the preseason.
Yeah, I think once they acquired Mullins, and honestly, how both of those guys played in that last preseason game, I think they made it easy. I think if they bring Mannion back on the practice squad, it would just be a stopgap thing, I think, until they're totally comfortable with Mullins. And, they could be looking at some of the developmental guys that got waived today instead. I can't imagine Mond coming back, honestly. So.
Yeah. I think the writing was on the wall for him, especially since Sean Mannion got the first half of that game on Saturday. I mean, that just kind of was like, okay, it seems like they're leaning Sean Mannion if they even do keep a third quarterback, which obviously they are not unless one of them lands on the practice squad. But so yeah, not really. I mean, I thought if they were going to keep three, it was going to be Mond just based on what could potentially still be there. But I mean, if you were going to keep three and Sean Mannion was your third, then it was like, what are you doing here at this point? I mean, like, it's kind of a waste of a roster spot, I think, with Sean Mannion because he is what he is. He's not going to be any better probably ever. So no offense to him, but I mean, that's just the way he is. He's been a career backup. He's played in 3 NFL games, and he's been below average as a backup. So, I mean, that's just the way it is for Mannion. But I think he could have a good career as a coach. I think he knows a lot of what needs to be done on the football field, but he just is not able to physically perform that when it comes to practices and training and in games.
Yeah, there was the one play where he scrambled and was running for a first down, and then he dove too soon and came up short.
Yeah. First down.
Like that is, I don't know. He just does not have the athletic ability. He's big and tall and has a pretty decent arm, but he has this big wind-up delivery. And I mean, I don't know. I think he'd probably be a really good coach. Like, he's a really smart guy, and if he's interested in going that route, there's a lot of really good coaches that weren't that good of players.
Right.
So there's no shame in that, and he's made a good living to this point, being a backup. So
that's right. That's what they always say. Yeah, if that's the dream, living a life as a backup quarterback or third string quarterback, something like that. That's don't have to do. You're not expected to do too much other than just do enough just to make the roster. But unless you get thrown into a game like he did last year, and then he's like, I don't know about this playing this Packers defense, man. I don't know. This is
Well, he might have played as well in that game as he did any of these preseason games.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Which, yeah, that's.
And I think Mon just needs to go somewhere else and get some reps and find his confidence, because he does not have the confidence or mental toughness at this point.
Yeah. And it really, you kind of saw the growth that it took him to get where he was his senior year at Mississippi. Was it Mississippi State or no? Texas A&M. I get those two confused with the similar colors, but Texas A&M, because he kind of progressively, he was okay his sophomore year, junior year a little better, and then senior year really kind of showed what he can do. So I don't know if that will happen in the NFL where he gets better as he gets older, but I think the Vikings just said, I think we've seen enough. We don't have the patience for this. And I think also this regime is going to make their pick in next year's draft for the quarterback that they want. Whether it's early or mid rounds, that's a whole nother debate that we can get into later on. We got football to play here, first of all, but I think this regime really wants to make their mark by drafting the next Vikings quarterback to basically replace Kirk, I think, in the 2024 season, because I don't think Kirk's here past 2024 unless the Vikings go on a huge, deep playoff run here in the next couple of years. But, so that's possible. But I still think even if you do decide to keep Kirk in 2024, you still need a backup plan, and you still need to have that eye towards the future because, like I said before, not every quarterback's going to be Tom Brady. Not every quarterback's going to be Aaron Rodgers and play into their late 30s, early 40s at a high level. So I think they need to have that backup plan.
Yep, they'll get to that. Yeah, down the road. So.
You're like me. Let's play football. Let's stop talking about future quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's just not something we can move the needle on today. So.
Very good. Well, let's go ahead and talk about some of these other players. Mike Brown, not really a surprise. Safety was cut. Receiver Dan Chisena, tight end Zach Davidson, guard Wyatt Davis, and we'll get into that whole third-round draft class from last year. Safety Miles Dorn, who had a really nice showing in that final preseason game. He gets it over Josh Metellus, which I don't know if what you've seen from Josh Metellus to say if you think he earned that spot over Miles Dorn, but I guess I don't. I just haven't seen much from Josh Metellus. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Metellus is more consistent on defense, and I think he's a better special teamer. So I think that was a clear choice for them. And Dorn did have a nice game, but that's not uncommon that a guy makes a play in a preseason game. And,
Yep. Yep. Gets cut. Everybody, all the fans are upset. Oh no. Yeah, we saw that. We've seen that many years. Of course, the quarterback for the Vikings. Which one, I should say? Kyle Sloter being one of them. Did some good things at the preseason. Taylor Heineke back in the day. He was another one that kind of flashed in the preseason. Oh, no, the Vikings cut him? Are you kidding me? But there's probably countless other ones. And I was just talking to the Bears podcast host, Bears Talk Underground podcast host, and he was saying the same thing with the Bears. It's like every NFL team, I'm pretty sure, has one guy every preseason that shines bright, and he ends up getting cut, and fans just lose their minds, as, of course, Joker from The Dark Knight quoted. But that's just the way it goes. I mean, especially this day and age when there's not many starters out there. Like, that play in these preseason games, like the Vikings, like they didn't have, like, you could probably count on one hand here how many starters actually played in a preseason game for the Vikings. And maybe, I don't know if did KJ Osborne take any snaps, or did he not even take any snaps?
I don't think he.
Okay.
Well, maybe he took a few snaps in the first one. I'm not.
Okay.
Sure.
I can't remember either, but yeah, I mean, it's very few and far between, and I think it's the way it should be, because I think, you saw with BC Johnson, which is so unfortunate for him, 1 year after tearing his other ACL, but if that would have been Adam Thielen, if that would have been Justin Jefferson, we'd be having a lot different discussion. I mean, as sad as it is for BC Johnson, we're glad that it's not one of those guys. But yeah, it does suck for him, because he was maybe not even going to make the roster at one point this training camp. I think he was now, but just because I think Kevin O'Connell had mentioned that in his press conference. But it's just a sad situation for him because of obviously past years, and obviously Kirk like what he sees with BC, but it's just the way it is. But
yeah, I think that he gave them kind of a veteran presence, for depth, that was a reliable guy that would run the right route, be in the right place, could make the play, but nothing spectacular. But the other guys they have there are more upside, less proven consistency to this point. So
yeah. Well, let's go through the rest of these guys. Guard Kyle Hinton, receiver Tristan Jackson, running back Bryant Kobach, linebacker William Kwinenku, Blake Lynch, the linebacker, outside linebacker Zach McLeod, said Kellen Mond, tight end Nick Muse, outside linebacker Janarius Robinson, defensive lineman TJ Smith, center Josh Sokol, and linebacker Chaz Surratt. Defensive lineman Jalen Twyman, possibly a practice squad candidate, and defensive lineman Armon Watts, who we had kind of mentioned pre-recording or pre-going live here, that was maybe a little bit of a surprise as well. And then for the Vikings, waived with an injury settlement was defensive lineman Julian Taylor. And so Vikings cutting all of those guys, and also making trades today, getting Ross Blacklock and trading away Jesse Davis. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But let's go through quickly here the positions on the 53. Kirk Cousins and Nick Mullins, the two quarterbacks. And then it's interesting, the Vikings, if you want to go to Vikings.com, you could see how many of each position they've kept over the last 5 years, which is kind of interesting to look at a little bit. But and the running backs, Dalvin Cook, Alex Madison for now, Kene Wongwu, and Ty Chandler. And I say for now because we've all seen the trade rumors, I'm sure by now, that Madison could be on the move. And as the Vikings potentially look for offensive line depth, that could be something that that changes here in the next 24 to 48 hours. CJ Ham, the fullback, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Amir Smith-Marset, Jalen Naylor, tight end, Irv Smith, Johnny Munt, and Ben Ellefson. I think that's pretty much how we had it. I think we talked about this last week, that we didn't think Zach Davidson or Nick Muse had a chance to beat any of those guys. Now, Muse and Davidson maybe have more potential for receiving, but they weren't good enough at receiving to warrant keeping them over these two guys.
Yeah, two really good practice squad candidates, both those guys.
Yep.
Davidson made some strides and got better as a blocker, but he had some drops. And if he can just get much more consistent catching the ball, and then Muse had some drops too, and like rookie jitters. But I think both those guys are guys that are going to play down the road. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're back. on the practice squad.
All right, and then offensive line, the starters right here from left to right tackle, Christian Darrisaw, Ezra Cleveland, Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, Brian O'Neill. And then the backup tackles, Blake Brandel, Vidarian Lowe, which is maybe a little bit of a surprise, Chris Reed, Austin Schlottman, and Oli Udo is still on the team, which is another interesting nugget, which I thought maybe he'd be gone, but he is still here. Anything that surprises you on the offensive line there?
Not really. I think Lowe is on the bubble if they need to make another move still. And I just think he's more a practice squad guy if they can get him there. But he has some talent, so maybe they feel like they can't get him there.
Yep. And we'll talk about those trades here after we get done going through the roster here. Dalvin Tomlinson on the defensive line, along with Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, Ross Blacklock, James Lynch, and Asezi Atumwo. The Golden Gopher stays with the Vikings. And then at linebacker, or did you have anything you wanted to say there, Kevin?
I was just going to say, I think, if they lined up today, it looks like Bullard would be one of the starting defensive linemen, and that would be ahead of Watts, who they waived. And, there were financial considerations there, but I think the performance issue was just his reliability on run support. Like, I don't think he grades out well as a run defender, and I think he shows flashes as a pass rush guy, but I think his shortcomings on run defense, and that's a little more important now with that 3-man line. Like, those guys need to be stout. And then they saved money, and I think they're, the speculation is they're saving money for a reason, because they maybe have one more move in them. But we'll see.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see what they decide to do there. And then you got the linebacker spot. Again, the Vikings shaking up this linebacker spot because of this is let's see. This is the full linebackers, I think, here. Well, this is just the outside linebackers. But here we'll go through those quick. Outside linebackers, Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, DJ Wanham, Patrick Jones II, and Luigi Villan, who I think was Villain, Luigi Villain. A little bit of a surprise, but I think, didn't he flash a little bit?
Yeah, I think he played pretty well, and he showed an aptitude for picking things up and improving. And they paid him a lot of money as an undrafted free agent, guaranteed money that they would have to eat. And I think he clearly was the next best guy. He was better than McLeod, and Surratt never showed up really in any phase so much. And Janarius Robinson still looked lost and had no change of direction and awareness. So I think he's the best of the prospects there. Little surprised Troy Dye is still around, but he's very athletic and he's got really good range, and he can help on special teams too, and he's got some experience playing. So, but I kind of thought Asamoah might have nudged him, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, let's look at the inside part of the linebacker core. Eric Kendricks, Jordan Hicks, no surprise, Brian Asamoah, and then Troy Dye making the linebacker core. I think maybe it was a race between him and Surratt maybe for that last linebacker spot, and they went with Troy Dye, and it's probably more based upon his special teams play probably than anything else.
They might have had actually Quenque William Quinku ahead of Surratt at this point.
Yeah.
Like Surratt didn't even get many snaps in that last game.
Yeah.
So obviously, you know, him and Mond and White Davis were huge misses in the third round.
Yeah. And we'll get to that too. We'll have to talk about that. And it was interesting today too on Purple Daily. They talked about how the 2016 and 2017 draft classes for the Vikings also just a complete failure, pretty much. I mean, they went through all the names on there, and you maybe heard one or two guys that have potential to be at least, a solid role player, but that was about it. It was like, geesh, this is just, what are you doing? What did
Yep.
you do in these drafts? But
And that draft was a very weak draft. Like those third round guys were really normally like fifth round caliber guys.
the 2021,
Yeah.
okay,
It really was, this last year was much deeper and better quality. But that said, you got to try to find guys that can emerge, and basically missing on 3 out of 4 in the third round is not good. You expect third rounders to at least still be around
yeah,
in year 2. So
yeah. Defensive back, Patrick Peterson, Harrison Smith, Cam Dantzler, Cam Bynum, Chandon Sullivan, Andrew Booth Jr., Chris Boyd, Lewis Seen, Caleb Evans, and Josh Metellus. They also, for some reason, it looked, oh yeah, I said Harrison Smith. Patrick Peterson, Harrison Smith, Cam Dantzler, Cam Bynum. Okay. They just grouped all the DBs together. Why not? So, I think the biggest surprise to me is Chris Boyd. I would have probably rather had another receiver instead of a 6th cornerback anyway, but especially when it's Chris Boyd. But obviously, they like what he can do on special teams, because it's definitely not, at least from my view, what he can do on the field that is on the defensive side. That's
he's talented, but he's kind of a coach killer with his lapses, if you will.
Yeah.
But he played pretty well in the preseason. He did okay. So
okay, all right. We can disagree on this show without yelling at each other. That's surprising, I know, right? And then the specialists. We talked about how we thought Jordan Berry would still probably win that punting job, but Brian Wright had a really good training camp, and he finally seems to have fixed his holding issues, knock on wood there, but it sounds like things are looking up for him in that regard, and we know he's got the leg to be a good punter in the league. So, and then, of course, Greg Joseph, and then the long snapper is Andrew D. Paola. So that is your Vikings, your 2022 currently Minnesota Vikings. And I guess any last thoughts on Ryan Wright over Jordan Berry there, Kevin?
I think he really showed in that last preseason game what they saw in him. Like, I think that he just has the right mentality, and I don't know. He looks like a pretty bright prospect for the future. He's got a good leg. He has some directional skills. Is fairly athletic. I hope they give him a different number than 6.
Yeah, it sounds like he's going to be getting a new number, which oh, that was such an eyesore. I mean, I'm an old school guy with, I don't like the defensive backs wearing a single digit number and all this stuff. Like, just drives me nuts.
Totally agree.
But it's just me being old school, even though, I'm not that old, but at least in some people's eyes, I should say. But Well, let's go ahead and talk about the trade that the Vikings, I should say trades that the Vikings made. Neither one seemed to be significant on paper, but I guess the biggest thing, first of all, the Ross Blacklock trade. Vikings dealt a 6th-round pick for him and then a 7th-round pick they got in return as well for Blacklock. And then they got rid of Jesse Davis, who is set to make over $3 million and probably was going to be the backup to the new right guard, Ed Ingram. So you really want to pay $3 million for a backup right guard? The Vikings said, no, we really don't. And they also saved a little bit of money by having Blacklock, I believe, instead of Armon Watts. I think Armon Watts was set to make a little bit more money there. So the Vikings have kind of opened this up here to potentially add more salary if they're able to trade for a starting caliber center or, add some depth. And of course, we've mentioned the Alex Madison trade rumors flying. If you could throw something with him to get somebody. What are your thoughts on these trades? What do you think this positions the Vikings to do?
Well, I think Blacklock has been an underachiever. He was a 2nd-round pick, and he's a talented player and disruptive. And, connection is that their defensive line coach, Chris Rumpf, was linebacker coach with the Texans the year that Blacklock was drafted there. So he spent a year with them and kind of knows what they're getting. And I think he probably fits, the mold of what they're looking for in those 3 down linemen. And, what they gave up for him was basically just a token, instead of having to try to claim the guy on waivers or something. So I think a really good move, and somebody that has a higher ceiling probably than Armon Watts had. But we'll see, I guess, on that. And then as far as Jesse Davis goes, the fact that they could get a trade partner and relieve even half of the money they were committed to, it's probably a good deal for the Steelers, who are having trouble on the offensive line. And I think Chris Reed and Schlottman played enough that and the other guys can play guard too, that they were really comfortable letting them go. And they may have just cut him if it came to that. So that was pretty good. Like, I think Quasey maybe knows what he's doing. Knows the business side, the cap situation, the data. It's not like giving up a 4th-round pick for Chris Herndon here. like it just, it's pretty.
pretty I was thinking about that. Like, if you could get a 4th-round pick out of Alexander Madison, just recoup that Chris Herndon pick, that'd be okay. I mean, I think the Vikings probably would love to get more out of Alexander Madison, but with the running back being such a very, I guess it's not really a premier position, at least not like it used to be.
Right.
And I think there's so many guys that can play. As long as you have a good offensive line or a decent offensive line, you can plug and play a lot of different guys back there. So I think that's why they're probably not going to get as much value out of Madison as they'd like. Interesting note on Ross Blacklock. His dad, Jimmy, was one of the Harlem Globetrotters from 1974 to 1987.
Huh?
So athletic family. So there you go.
No, he's I remember when he came out, he was a borderline. He was a borderline, late 1st, 2nd-round pick kind of guy.
Yep.
And he was disruptive, and I'm surprised he hasn't done better in the NFL, and that he's in this spot. But I guess I don't know all the details about his stay with Houston, but I mean, I think that's a good flyer to take on a guy like that with some upside. So
Yeah, you mentioned how highly touted he was coming out of college. He was ranked as the number 4 defensive tackle in the 2020 draft by Bucky Brooks and Dan Brugler, and then was ranked number 5 among the position group by Mel Kiper and PFF. So he has the potential. I think the potential is there. Now the next question is, can Ed Donatel and this coaching staff get the most out of him? And to be honest with you, Kevin, if he can just be a replacement level type of player, I mean, for what the Vikings paid to get, they didn't pay a premium price here. I mean, they paid a
yeah,
7th round, or they paid a 6th round draft pick, and they got a 7th back in return. So it's like you barely lose anything for this trade, and you maybe get a higher ceiling for a guy compared to, like you said, Armand Watts.
yeah, yeah. And Watts was, gonna probably be gone after this year anyway.
Yep, last year of his contract, I think. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So good pickup there for the Vikings. So, and then Blacklock, he would have 2 years left on his deal, right? So he's got this year and next year. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Well, yeah, I think it's a good trade. What do you expect to see from the Vikings yet here? Do you expect to see if they get a claim on somebody? Like I saw, like Nick Martin was a guy that was released by the Saints, and we know the Saints usually, at least over the last few years, have had a really good offensive line. And so any depth that they spill over is probably a pretty decent player that could be going to a team that doesn't have as much good depth on their offensive line. And Nick Martin, I would say, maybe has the potential, and if he's not already, a better center than Austin Schlottman. But I guess I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or just the waiver wire and trades in general there.
So the 2 center prospects that I've heard as possibilities for the Vikings would be Dieter with Miami, who, Chris Cooper, their line coach, would be familiar with him, and he's a starting caliber center. Whether he's actually better than Bradbury or not, I don't know, but he's currently a backup on their depth chart. And then the other guy is Tyler Shatley for the Jags, who's can play center or guard. Those are the 2 guys I've heard mentioned. I get the impression they're going to roll with the guys they have, and they feel like between Bradbury, Reed, and Schlottman, they'll be okay. But we'll see what's out there for those other guys. If there's as many teams as rumored interested in Madison, I would think that that's a legitimate bargaining chip. I would think that maybe a player makes more sense than a pick in a situation like that.
At least if you're building for this year.
Yeah. And I think they've cleared almost $4 million in cap space today. Maybe they're gearing up to sign a
Sue,
or
bring JC Treader out of retirement.
Yeah, or
a week after.
Or, I've heard that mentioned that they're interested in Odell Beckham Jr.
Really?
Which would probably not be a week 1 thing, but a down the road thing.
Right, because of his injury. Yeah.
And I think the one thing they really are probably looking at tonight is a receiver that can be a reliable punt returner. And in just scanning the names, this Alex Erickson, who was let go by Washington, has some punt return experience. And would be, probably more reliable than Smith Marset. Um, and I think there's room, to make one or two more cuts from the guys that made this initial 53 and guys that they would hope they could eventually get into the practice squad. And, every
Yeah.
other team is trying to do the same thing. So,
Yeah, you mentioned Vidarian Lowe on the offensive side, linebacker wise. Like we talked about those guys that are potentially on this team, like Troy Dye. He could potentially find his way out if they bring in another defensive lineman, or maybe Luigi Villain. But I think they like him enough. If it came down to Ndamukong Suh, for example, over him, then maybe they keep him, or maybe Ndamukong Suh would replace a Jonathan Bullard or a James Lynch or a Sezi Atumwal.
yep. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think there's still something brewing here. Whether it's a signing, whether it's waiver claim, I still think, like, especially if the Vikings don't get what they want off the waiver, which they're ranked 12th right now on the waiver wire, which is an interesting note. So there are 11 teams that could say that, hey, we want Nick Martin, for example. That's a guy that I mentioned. I know maybe the Vikings wouldn't like that, or maybe they would. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they would prefer something like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what the Vikings do after they find out. I think it's about 1 o'clock, or no, about 11 o'clock Central Time. I want to say tomorrow is when some of these names will start to be. It'll be starting to come around and say, okay, this person was claimed by this team, and yada yada yada. So that's kind of when you can expect to hear more about that. So we might do another. I might do a short video at some point this week, just recapping what happened there. But it's going to be interesting. And then, of course, next week we'll have our preview with Green Bay, and then on Thursday morning I'll be dropping the podcast episode I did with the Bears Talk Underground host. So it was a fun conversation with him, and he's pretty confident in the Bears, probably more confident than at least I am. I really don't think the Bears are going to be all that good, but maybe some of those guys that we don't know as much about that he told me about, which you'll have to tune in to find out who those guys are. But maybe some of those guys will be key impact players for them. But these next 24, 48 hours, I think, are going to be very interesting in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I expect a couple more moves before they play Green Bay. I really do. So
you don't think that they'll go out there and sign and get somebody, like a top 25, top 20, ish type center in the league, like you don't quite expect something like that, but maybe more along the 25 to 30 range, if that even.
Well, I'd be really surprised if they don't add a punt returner.
Punt returner.
Like I really think they're going to get a punt returner, and I think if there's one area that is legitimate, it would be if they could sign a guy like Suh. That would really bolster their defensive line. And
it would.
So I think they'd try that, and whether they get any nibbles on Madison or not remains to be seen. There's lots of running backs that are out there today that could be of interest. So it's just a very soft market for running backs always. So
yeah, I saw one report that said there were 12 teams interested, but again, that doesn't mean that there's 12 teams interested in giving the Vikings a second round pick or even a third round pick for that matter.
Yeah.
This could be hey, we'll give you a fifth, we'll give you a sixth, we'll give you this or that, I'm guessing if it was a third or better, the Vikings probably would have accepted a trade by now.
Yeah, and if he plays it out and then signs a big contract, they'll probably get a comp pick for him.
Yeah, that's true.
Could conceivably be third, fourth, fifth anyway. So
Yep.
I don't know, that's why I think it makes more sense for a player to be involved.
Yep.
An existing player, but we'll see. I don't think the door's closed on moving him.
Yeah.
And
a lot of depth there.
Yeah, and I do think that they'll claim at least one guy. So,
yeah, I'm sure they probably tried to claim at least a couple.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still I don't know what your thoughts are on Nick Martin. Maybe you don't have any thoughts on Nick Martin, but I still think that he would be an upgrade over Schlottmann. But
I would just,
is that worth?
I would put him as a wash.
Yeah.
Like Schlottmann knows the scheme.
Yeah.
Knows the coaches. I don't know if Nick Martin would be necessarily any better than Schlottmann. So
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else, Kevin, that you thought was noteworthy from the day's happenings, whether it's with the Vikings or I guess with the league?
Not really. Like, I think with the Vikings cuts, I think they were, other than Watts, I think very predictable. If you watch the games closely and have been tracking things and reading between the lines on who's getting reps and all that stuff, I think it played out pretty much as expected. And I think a fair number of these guys will be back on the practice squad starting tomorrow. And some of these guys I think have long range potential still, but I don't think Mond and Wyatt Davis and Chaz Surratt are among them.
Yeah. Yep. Very good. Well, before we get to final statements, we do now have a Venmo. And so you can go ahead and if you would like to show us some love on Venmo, it's at Skol Purple Pod, or you could scan that right now. Would love to have you guys help support the show, keep the lights on, so to speak, here at the podcast, Skol Purple Pod on Venmo. So really appreciate anything you could send our way. Even a little bit would be great. So again, that's at Skol Purple Pod there on Venmo. And Kevin, let's get into these final statements here. As the final 53 is pretty close to being rounded out. What do you expect from this 53? Is it any different than what your expectations or thoughts were a week ago at this time?
Not so much, but I think their defense is much improved, and I think the depth is better, and they've got an infusion of youth here coming through the pipeline. So I think they're going to rebound nicely here, I think, and other than BZ Johnson, they made it without any major injuries, and let's just hope nobody sleeps funny on their neck.
Yeah,
these next few days.
Which I've done plenty, but we don't care about that. Yeah, I'm excited to see. Hopefully, everybody stays healthy or mostly healthy, other than BC Johnson. But yeah, we hope that he gets better soon, and hopefully, he's able to still have a good career yet. I know that's devastating for him. Yeah, so hopefully things will be improved a little bit even yet in the next 24 to 48 hours, like I said. And I agree. I think the depth on defense is a little bit better than what I thought it would be, but I'm still on that defensive line a little worried, especially if there's injuries. I'm still a little worried about the depth there. And then, even the drop off still from Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter to DJ Wanham and Patrick Jones. Like, I still do think that they're in a better spot than they were a year ago, where you had DJ Wanham basically being the other starting end, and then when you lose Danielle Hunter, oh well, now he's gone as well. And then of course the Everson Griffin um, situation with that too. But I'm excited to see what the starters can do. We've seen plenty of these backups, more than we want to, probably in a lot of cases, which is why we saw all these cuts today. But looking forward to the season, and again, we'll have another episode next week, and I might have a shorter episode to recap any moves that the Vikings make over the next 24 to 48 hours. So. Well, Kevin, hey, appreciate you joining me tonight. And again, always appreciate everybody else joining us as well. And of course, as always, Skol.